So it's a lie. I want to tell you, it's a lie. This idea that there is no military solution is a lie. And we're going to preemptively keep ourselves from achieving the victory that Ukraine can achieve if we believe the lie that there is no military solution. Okay. So let's go back and look at what was going on at the NATO the NATO forum in The Hague just this last couple of days. NATO leaders at the summit in The Hague have committed to investing 5% of GDP. That's a good thing. It was just they were trying to get to 2%, or they set the goal for 2% about a decade ago. Each member country will present an annual plan to gradually achieve this goal. So it's not 5% tomorrow. They're going to work out plans to that. They've agreed to 5% over time. It's not nothing, but it's not everything. The document also emphasized the continued support for Ukraine as its security is the security of the alliance. And then Mark Rutte also reported it's safe to assume that military aid to Ukraine this year will exceed last year's $50 billion. That's really good news. That'll keep Ukraine going, whether they're purchasing their own or purchasing from other European countries or even potentially from the United States, although that's an open question. Now, Marco Rubio was being interviewed, and he said this: the first half was pretty good, and then he fell right back into his own lie about how there's no military solution. Listen to the first half, and then we'll listen to the second.
What more at this point is the administration doing to apply more pressure on Russia here?
Well, I don't think the term is, a lot of people like to say about pressure on Russia. Our sense of it is that the Russians are going to try to achieve in the battlefield what they've demanded in the negotiating table, which is certain territories at their administrative lines and the like.
That's right. They are going to achieve that because they think they can prevail. And as long as they think they can prevail, the war will go on.
We think it's going to be a lot harder for them to achieve that than they think it's going to be. The truth is that in this year alone, since January, over 80,000 Russian troops have been killed just since January. I think you compare that to the Ukrainian numbers are far less, so the death ratio is very bad, but Putin keeps feeding into the war machine. We'd like this conflict to end. It's bloody, it's destructive, it's nonsensical, but nonetheless, they have not shown a willingness to move forward. So we're going to continue to engage. The president's going to continue to engage. Look,
Will
the president,
because he said before he might walk
well,
away.
engage in the sense that it is an opportunity for us to make a difference and get them to the table. We're going to take it. He wants to see this war end. A lot of people are saying put on more sanctions. Now, Congress is working on that. You know, Lindsey Graham has a bill and others, and that may happen. You know, we've talked to them about how to frame it, how to structure it, because ultimately we think it needs to have enough flexibility for the president to be able to impose sanctions. And we haven't taken off any of the sanctions that we have on. All the Russian sanctions are still in place.
Okay, so why not impose more sanctions? Because if you want to cause them to think that they can't win the war, you impose massive sanctions on Russia and arm Ukraine, and that drives the Russians to the table because they realize they can't win. That's one solution. Here's the way that he's thinking about it, and it's pretty bad.
I think what everybody has to remember, however, is that the minute we impose sanctions on Russia, if we did what everybody here wants us to do, and that is come in and crush them with more sanctions, we probably lose our ability to talk to them about the ceasefire. And then who's talking to them? Because they don't talk to anybody else in Europe. They don't talk to anybody else in the world who is on our side of this thing and views it the way we do. So I don't think the president will know the right time and place in which he may have to do that. He has said he may have to do that. But if he does it, you're almost admitting that this is not going to be negotiated anytime soon. So he wants to give it every opportunity to have influence over the Russian Federation towards a ceasefire. And that's the option he's trying to preserve, because it's the option of peace.
Okay, this is all wrong. This is backwards. It's a lie that's killing Ukraine. Look, if a robber breaks into your house, a burglar, and he's stealing your stuff, and he's bigger than you, so he's intimidating, right? And you're like, you call out the window next door. There's football players that live there that you're pretty friendly with. You can call them over. They can intimidate him and cause him to rethink his actions. Or you can speak kindly and gently, just pleasant words that will soothe the robber and help the robber feel good about his self-esteem. Which do you think is actually going to solve the problem? Okay, no military solution, says Ben Hodges. We haven't even tried. No commitment to helping Ukraine win. Indecisive delivery of aid. Weak efforts to disrupt Russian oil export to India and China. Zero pressure by the President of the United States on Putin. Yet Ukraine has stopped Russia after 11 years. Give them the tools to win. That's right. And more to the point. This is Marko Mikkelsen from Estonia. History proves that Russia's imperialist wars cannot be ended or contained through diplomacy. We're trying diplomacy before we cause them to have to come to diplomacy. Russian aggression must be stopped and strategically defeated before diplomacy can have a say. I think that's spot on. The Institute for the Study of War posted this. NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte assessed that Russia is the largest existential threat to NATO members today, and that Russia is preparing for a protracted war with NATO. And this particular paragraph got my attention in a big way. Kremlin continues efforts to augment Russia's combat power by setting conditions to subsume forces from Russia's Collective Security Treaty Organization allies under Russian military command. If something like this happens, that the odds of a World War III style something will have significantly increased, like massively increased. If you see like Russia taking command of Belarusian forces or something along those lines, you'll see that that would be a big marker. Meanwhile, Viktor Orban is saying Putin is not the main threat. We are stronger. The real danger is losing our position in global trade. Okay, NATO is not about global trade. There are other organizations for that. Well, why was NATO even formed to begin with? NATO is a mutual defense pact against possible aggression from the Russians. The Soviet Union at the time, but the Russians, that's who they're still worried about, right? It's not about global trade. And this coming from the leader of the weakest, poorest member of Europe. Okay. NATO has no business in Ukraine, he says. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. Neither is Russia. And my job is to keep it as it is. Look, this isn't about settling disputes within NATO. It's about protecting from Russia, defending against threats from Russia. Okay. Trump was here talking about things like, and you could apply this to Ukraine just like you could to Israel and Iran conflict. They're like two kids on a schoolyard, they're fighting like crazy. You can't stop them. Let them go at it for 2 or 3 minutes. Then it's easier to break it up, says Trump about Israel-Iran conflict. But he could have been saying the same thing about Ukraine as far as the way that he's processing and thinking through this. Meanwhile, the Lieutenant General this is a 4-star general, Alexis Grinkowicz, he is nominated by President Trump for the position of Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. He expressed confidence that Ukraine is capable of winning the war against Russia, while Rubio is saying that there is no military solution. He thinks there is. This was his response to a question about future prospects of the war, and he supported continuing aid to Ukraine. Now, while we're saying there's no military solution, what are the Russians saying? Well, Solovyov is saying, how many Orishnik missiles are needed for Kyiv? It doesn't need to be bombarded. It needs to be destroyed and then rebuilt. North Korean workers will do a great job. Until that mentality gets shifted, nothing else will change. Ukrainian security experts just delivered the most sobering war assessment yet. GlobeSec surveyed 61 top officials, including 7 former defense ministers, managing this war firsthand. The verdict challenges every peace proposal you've ever heard. Listen to this. The most likely outcome, 38% chance of grinding war of attrition as resources run dry. Military factors now drive the conflict 9-1 over politics, up from 5.5. in 2022. Ukraine scaled drone production from 0 to 4 million planned for 2025. I think they'll surpass that. This isn't about diplomacy anymore. The second most likely chance is some kind of hybrid World War III. That's kind of gloomy, isn't it? The trigger Western nuclear paralysis. Quote, while our partners fear Russia using nuclear weapons, we make Russia feel their blackmailing bears fruit. That's right. We're saying kind, gentle thoughts, soothing words to a robber that has broken into our home because we want to increase his self-esteem so he doesn't rob us anymore. It's that kind of stupid stuff. Iran, Pakistan, and India are watching nuclear threats work against the West, so why not use them? Nuclear blackmail becomes the new global playbook. Regional conflicts explode worldwide as authoritarian regimes test Western resolve. Yeah, that's right. This line here, The world is looking at this and going, well, if nuclear threats work against the West, hey, we should be doing that too. Yeah, that's what we're going to get. We're going to get into a nuclear arms race if we're not careful. The best case scenario is just 2% probability, and it's not even actual peace. European peacekeepers, no Ukrainian neutrality. Russia would exploit this legal language as vague and ambiguous as possible to justify their next attack. And then the expert's brutal reality is saying this, that Russia will never accept Ukraine as an independent sovereign country. Any ceasefire gives Moscow time to rebuild while constraining Ukrainian defense development. Every peace deal becomes preparation for renewed aggression. That's where we're going, because we're saying that there's no military solution. And in doing that, we're going to constrict the good guys. And that's just terrible. Okay, now let's look at this. 20 people killed and almost 300 injured by Russian missile strike on Dnipro yesterday. That's the new statistics, including a church that was also damaged by the strike. Little child, 6-year-old, saying, "We're all going to die now." A 6-year-old boy cried that during the 24 June Russian attack on Dnipro that damaged a children's development center. According to Supply News, he was hiding in the corridor of the center with his grandma and several other staff members when the Russian missile struck eastern Dnipro. That's just tragic. Last night, there were 71 Iranian but Russian-built drones that came at Ukraine last night. This is frightening to me because, again, when I see these low numbers, I know that they're building up, they're saving up for a rainy day. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones strike deep into Russia. They hit a Tangarog military drone plant overnight. Another blow to Moscow's war machine. This is some video footage of it. Apparently, there were drones also in Crimea, Rostov, Saratov, Tangarod, and Kazan. 950 Russians off the battlefield. This is pretty low. 1 tank, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 58 artillery systems, 123 vehicles and fuel tanks. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian invaders led 49 assaults, but when you're looking at 49 assaults and you're only seeing 950, it tells you something about the strength of the assaults or the how few numbers are going forward or what have you. In one single day, Russian forces launched 469 strikes across southern Zaporizhia Oblast. It's located close to the front line, and some parts of the region are occupied. Russian strikes damaged private homes, outbuildings, cars, leaving 5 civilians wounded. So that's what's going on there as they're attacking the cities. Russian forces have begun repurposing, and I thought this was really interesting as well because it's telling you how they're cannibalizing some things from here for there. Russian forces have begun repurposing naval AK-631 autocannons as fixed defensive firing positions. The AK-630 is a 6-barreled 30-millimeter cannon with a rate of fire up to 1,000 rounds per minute. These systems are being removed from ships and deployed on land as occupied southern regions in the occupied southern regions of Ukraine. So they're taking off ships. They're cannibalizing. Like, that's really interesting. Meanwhile, Ukraine began serial production of its new ballistic Sapsan missile. We will surprise enemies more than once, he added. It's already struck a Russian military target 300 kilometers from launch. Okay. Norway is bringing in naval drone production to Ukraine in a major Black Sea defense boost. And here's what's going on there. The development and manufacture of uncrewed surface vessels on Ukrainian territory is part of its expanded support of Ukraine's maritime defense efforts. According to Norwegian Ministry of Defense, part of this funding will be used to develop and produce uncrewed maritime vehicles. And that's the way of the future. I mean, Navy has changed just like the Army has. Now, here's just an interesting story. Russians are dropping radios to annoy people with propaganda. I assume there are also booby traps. Should probably stay away from them at all costs and let them play their BS until the battery runs out or shoot it. I don't know. Okay, now, what was interesting to my mind was that the Nazis used to do something like that, but that for their own population, they'd give away radios with it would only tune to one station, and that was their Nazi propaganda station. And Goebbels was annoyed that he had to play 70% music to 30% propaganda. He couldn't go very much higher, or people would just tune out. Here's another example of them actually dropping these radios. You'll see this in, like, these are drones that'll come in and drop the radios, which is really kind of a new bizarre tactic. So there's the radio. Yeah, okay. Victory will be ours, Russian soldiers shout as they victoriously crash into trees, shouting, thank you for these goods. Victory will be ours. And then he's off to the races. Yep. I don't know why they filmed that or why they let that film out. All right. Last little bit. This tells you everything you need to know about this globalist gang of bullies and frauds. What's he talking about? This is Che Bowes from RT, the wife of a grossly corrupt dictator and non-NATO member currently destroying his country, stands in the first row at the NATO summit grinning. Well, yeah, except who's going to tell him that this person in the middle is not Olena Zelenska? Who is it? It's the Italian prime minister. Oops. All right. Trump does not, the last thing, this is Darth Putin. Trump does not want new sanctions in case they stop a ceasefire. We say we are not interested in. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.